I used to be in darkness during Cultural Revolution, had no future. So I know how these kids feel when they're in darkness today. I started doing research, trying to figure out how can I reduce the scarring of the eyeball, therefore restoring eyesight in these folks. There's more to life than what we see.
I'm Raymond Arroyo. Welcome to Arroyo Grande. This episode's a true eye-opener. Dr. Ming Wang is not only Dolly Parton's eye surgeon, but a man who's restored sight to millions through his landmark invention after escaping communist China. And he'll share the secret of truly seeing with you and help protect your eyes. Don't miss this. But first, with Pope Francis battling double pneumonia for weeks, I've been getting a lot of questions about what's really going on in Rome, what happens if a pope is incapacitated, and what about that conclave process, Raymond? Well, for answers, we go to Rome, where we're joined by Father Robert Sirico, co-founder of the Acton Institute and President Emeritus, and my old pal. Father, thank you for being here.
Good to be with you on this format, too, this forum. Thank you. It's exciting.
Kind of fun. A little looser than our normal interactions. Look, you knew the last few popes personally, Father.
Yeah.
Tell me where we are in this moment. Pope Francis's situation remains touch and go. I mean, he's 88, he's battling double pneumonia, but they now say he's stable, at least for now.
Right. Well, you know, in a way, this illness of the last 2 weeks plus is kind of as ambiguous as the whole pontificate has been, because what you have, I mean, if you read it like scripture study, you know, you have to learn how to exegete the New Testament. And with the Gospels, what you look for is the ipsissima verbi, the very words of Jesus. And then there's the redaction of the redactor, the writer, the author. And the epistemi verbi here is the doctors. They're just telling you what the science is. But the redactors, the Gnostic redactors, is the Vatican bureaucracy who want to, you know, maintain this grand tradition of the Pope is in good health until he's dead.
Right.
And I understand the tendency to do that. I mean, people do that with their grandmothers in the hospital when you talk to the kids. Oh, grandma's fine. Grandma's fine.
Yeah.
Now grandma's in heaven. You know, so it's that kind of situation here. But once you dig beneath all of that, and these people know how to read that, everyone's just kind of sitting on a mousetrap. You know, it's about to spring, and you just don't know when it's going to spring.
Yeah, that seems to be the feeling of everybody I'm talking to. There's a tension. They know something's about to happen. But reading these daily updates on the Pope's health, I mean, it reminds me of the Queen of England. Remember, the Queen slept serenely at Balmoral. You know, that's always the line. And then the next day she's gone. But the most troubling thing to my eye, Father, and you're in Rome, so you can really speak to this. What do you make of the nightly prayer vigils? Every night for more than a week, major cardinals have been conducting these prayer services for the health of the Pope. And I know there are a few hundred people there every night, but the regularity of that tells me this may be more serious or he's in more danger than they're letting on.
Well, right up until today, I mean, there was a general consensus without regard to ideology now. This isn't a conservative liberal thing. There was a consensus that he's not getting out of the hospital. If he's getting out of the hospital, he's getting out of the hospital at the last minute so that he could die at the Vatican, because no pope's ever not died there, at least in 1,000 years, probably. I don't know. So, I mean, that was the consensus. Now, this came out late in the day. It'll be interesting tomorrow to pick up the atmosphere from other people. I'm having dinner with a journalist tomorrow night, and that journalists have a good assessment of what's going on.
Yeah. Well, here's a question I've been getting a lot of over the last couple of weeks. What happens if a pope gets too sick to rule? You know, what if he's incapacitated, or God forbid, you know, he can't breathe. He's on intubated and on a ventilator.
And that's very possible in this circumstance. I mean, it's not inconceivable, and it wasn't inconceivable to Pope Francis, because he said, and this is in the reporting, that in 2013, when he was elected, he drew up a kind of will that were he incapacitated, permanently incapacitated, that he now resigns. So there would be a resignation. And a resignation would be, or if what they're asking is what happens after the resignation, it would be much more like what obviously Benedict did in 2013 than John Paul II and all the previous popes, because there's a different schedule to be observed depending on the circumstance.
Yeah, well, the problem with that letter, Father, is the Pope claims he doesn't know where it went. He gave it to the Secretary of State at the time, but nobody knows where that is. And here's the bigger question: who would invoke the letter and say, "Guess what? The Pope is in such straits that we're going to use this letter," and he's officially resigned? Who makes that call?
The dean, which is Cardinal Ray, he runs the church in the interregnum. So presumably that would be the interregnum. I find it very difficult to believe that that letter is really lost. That's just too important a letter to have gotten lost. And if it's in the Secretary of State's office, then somebody there has it, and there are probably multiple copies of it.
Explain to people who are not Catholic. This is another question I've gotten from so many of our viewers and listeners. Well, first of all, where did the papacy originate? They say, where is that in Scripture? I don't read the Pope anywhere in Scripture. Where did it come from, Father?
Well, first of all, the word Pope simply means father. And it originates in the Gospel of Matthew, when Jesus says to Peter, "You are Peter," and he's playing with his name here, because Petros, "you are Peter, and upon this rock," this Petros, "I will build my church, the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." And admittedly, it is not a defined and clear statement like you have given throughout the centuries, and particularly at Vatican I and at Vatican II, for that matter, the two councils that define the papacy. So the church sees its origin in that text in Matthew's Gospel, but also even as early as the first century, the letter of Clement, who was the Roman bishop, the third successor, if I counted right, maybe the fourth pope. He refers to himself in writing to the Corinthians. He's writing to the same people that, maybe a
Paul
generation later that Paul wrote to. By the way, dealing with some of the similar problems that Paul was dealing with. And he says, here I am in Rome, something to the effect that God has given me the responsibility to preside over all the churches in love. So he sees himself in that way. And as you go through the history of the church, even those who would then become Orthodox 1,000 years later always saw the role of the Pope as the patriarch of the West, who had first dibs, so to speak, the first among equals. So even when they renounced his universal governing authority, they still acknowledged that he was patriarch and had a very important place in the history of the church. So this is not nowhere. This didn't just happen in 1930.
No, and then there's the other scene in the Acts of the Apostles where the bishops are the apostles are squabbling, and it's Peter who stands up and says, "Wait a minute, this is what we believe. This is it."
Well,
so go ahead.
No, I was going to say he's the first to speak at Pentecost. He's always, when the list of the apostles is given, he's always the first on the list. So I mean, something's there. Granted, it develops as all church teaching develops. The Holy Trinity, the belief in the Holy Trinity. The word Trinity isn't in the Bible. For that matter, the word Bible isn't in the Bible. So there you would have a development and a deeper understanding as you come to encounter Christ more fully.
Yeah, and well, and that line of Jesus, I mean, when he says, I give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, what you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven.
Right.
That's a pretty clear mandate, and that's to Peter. So,
Yeah.
that's a pretty strong scriptural citation if you need
Yeah.
one. And why is the Pope important to Christianity, broadly speaking, Father? I mean, we don't cover the new president of the Southern Baptist Convention or the new, bishop of the Episcopal Church in England the way the world focuses on the election of a new pope.
Well, I think even the secular world acknowledges that this is the first church. This is, I mean, St. Peter's Basilica is built over the bones of St. Peter. It's right there. And here he is, right in the vicinity of that first pope. So I think there's a historic sense that this role is significant. And if Christianity is significant in the world, it is significant because Catholicism is significant, because Catholicism provided a certain unity of the church, a collection, a kind of succession that would not otherwise exist.
Yeah, and there is that chain of men that goes right back to St. Peter, through the centuries. And look, some of them were scoundrels, some of them were worse than scoundrels, and some of them were saints, and we knew a couple of those people as well. Should the Pope resign, Father Sirico, or pass away? What happens? What's the first thing that happens?
Well, those are two different questions. If the Pope resigns, then what happens is they kind of kick the whole process forward. In other words, they eliminate the laying of the body in state. Right. They eliminate the 9 days of masses.
Of mourning,
At least according to what I know to be the governing document, there would then be a set of what are called congregations. These are meetings of cardinals, not just the voting cardinals, but the cardinals over 80, and they would meet together, and there'd be a series of informal lectures given by each of the cardinals, and it's kind of divided in terms of, I think the last one had about 7 or 8 minutes each.
Right.
And this is a way of getting them to talk openly. Here's what the church needs. And then, of course, there are these coffee breaks, and people get to know one another. And that's going to be very important now because so many of these cardinals are new, and they come from what Pope Francis has called the periphery. So these are not people who are in and out of Rome a lot. And in fact, a lot of that has been cut down by this Pope. During this pontificate, there was much less meetings. And then, of course, the COVID did that too. So if he resigns, we go right to those congregations.
Yeah. And those go for what, a week, if memory serves or so? These general congregations, general meetings of the cardinals?
Yeah, just about a week. Now, do you want gossip?
Go ahead. I love gossip, and our audience adores it. Go ahead.
I don't know if any of this is true. We have to see. But the gossip is, there's several of these rumors, is that the chief canonist, Cardinal Ghirlanda, also a Jesuit, has been in and out of the hospital room, and that they have been working on a document that will revise that governing document that I mentioned earlier that governs the transition and the conclave and the election. And that in this document, it indicates, and this is where the rumor is, I don't know if this is true or not, but it's not uninformed. It's not out of the realm of possibility. That would say that there won't be these congregations, or if there are these congregations, they will follow the method of meeting that the Synod had, which is rather than just a series of conversations and lectures by the cardinals over X number of days, that they sit around a table with 10 people and all express themselves, say a little prayer, and then have it all redacted. And then the redactor would say, this is the consensus at the table.
So the rumor is it's controlled speech like the Synod rather than an open conversation among equal cardinals. So this would be Pope Francis trying to control the outcome of that general congregation.
And that maybe lay people, like at the Synod, lay people and non-cardinals could be added to that conversation. It's a conversation. It's not the vote. So that's one of the the rumors that's going around, and has really been pushed by some notable influential Jesuits.
Do you think that's a good idea? I think that's a horrible idea, having covered these synods.
I have had it as a priest for 35 years with, now let's break up into small groups. Yeah. I'd much rather have, especially at this time, with all of the questions that are on the table, with the ambiguity of this pontificate in a lot of ways, again, regardless of left and right. Yeah. You want to settle some of the issues, you want to bring unity together. I think it is very important that those cardinals have a chance to just say what's on their hearts. And then listen to each other, then meet with each other and talk. And I think it's very important that the cardinals over 80, that is the ones who are retired, that no longer have a vote, that they be heard, because they are the least politicized at this point. They come from outside of that whole world of consideration and negotiation, all of that. And they also have the most wisdom, or at least the most years, and that they're worth hearing.
Yeah, well, those general congregations, again, that's where the mind of the cardinals kind of takes shape. I mean, that's what happened in the last two conclaves. The big issues that the church should be dealing with kind of come to the fore, and that's when they meet each other. As you said, it's kind of a getting to know you session. They meet in these general congregations, and they're out at dinner and out at get-togethers in the evenings where they further cement those coalitions, their like-mindedness on certain issues. Now, Father, I want to remind people, when Pope Francis was elected, our friend Cardinal George Pell, of happy memory, a great man, Pell's big calling card, if you will, for the election of Pope Francis was he was going to revise and fix the Curia, the workings of the Vatican, and he was going to root out corruption and fix the financial problems. Yes. One could argue neither of those things have happened. In fact, just the opposite. In many cases.
There's still a trial going on, and one of the chief culprits who has been found guilty by a Vatican court is a cardinal who has had his voting privileges removed. So this is ongoing. They never did the audit that Pell had begun. So that certainly, and as to reviving or renewing the Roman Curia, I invite you to come here and talk to me. They'll talk to you because they're so afraid right now. Yeah. The one true thing is that these curial officials don't want to pop their head up. That it's very nerve-wracking. This period is very nerve-wracking. Yeah. So no, neither of those. And then, of course, the sex scandal still leaves a lot of untied loose ends.
Yeah. No. Briefly run down what happens in the conclave. So after a week of those general congregations, those general meetings, then the cardinals go and they're locked away in the Sistine Chapel. Tell people quickly about that process.
Before they do that, they go into prayer at the Chapel of St. Paul, which is just basically across a corridor or a room from the Sistine Chapel. When they're done with prayer for the election of a new pope, they process in singing the Veni Creator Spiritus, which is really beautiful. You want to see a great rendition of how this is done, I refer you to Not Conclave, which is all, I'll talk about that if you want.
Good, yeah, we will.
But the shoes of the fisherman, because they show it so beautifully done. And then Conclave, this is the with the key, everyone who is not a cardinal is thrown out of the Sistine Chapel, and they close the door and lock it. And these men then are there praying and voting. Now, there's a little bit different now because they have the house, Casa Santa Marta, which is, you have to take a bus to get to it. Yeah. So to keep the or the cloister of the conclave, they're not to with anybody. Their phones are taken away, no outside communication, nothing that would influence them. And they take an oath that they will vote for whom they believe God wants them to vote for.
Well, as you mentioned, conclave is with the key. They lock them in with the key, which is what that term refers to. But I like the old days, Father, where they brought out the cots and lined the halls of the Vatican museums and made them stay there uncomfortably. They're sharing bathrooms. And the discomfort forced them to come up with a pope. But you mentioned conclave. What did the movie get wrong?
The color of the cardinals' robes. That was the most visible and obvious thing. Did you see that?
I did. I saw it.
They were dark. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
It annoyed me throughout the whole movie that they couldn't even get that with as much money and great actors who were playing it. There's no doubt about that. That they couldn't get the color of the robes. And then also the whole tone of the way the cardinals would speak with one another was so stilted and so written by people who obviously have not been around. The people who have been around the church are the people who designed those sets that had a real feel for the way things kind of go inside the Vatican.
And look,
but Harris, who's the author of the thing, should have stuck to Pompeii. His book on Pompeii is wonderful, but he should not have done this. It's an embarrassment. It's superficial.
It's a stunt ending. And I found it boring, I have to tell you. They did capture some of the movements of the ritual, but the way they imparted them, they were so stilted. I was bored to tears, I have to tell you. Until the explosion went off near the end, I was practically sleeping.
Yeah, that woke me up too. But and they didn't show the smoke backing up into the Sistine Chapel. That happened the last conclave. I remember Cardinal Pell telling me about that.
Yeah, the smoke came back. They tried to light it and close the door, and the smoke came into the Sistine Chapel. Which
wasn't working.
That might have been an indication of something. But tell me, what are the major features that you're going to be looking for, or you think the Church should be looking for in a new pope? I mean, you briefly touched on some of the challenges, the ambiguity, this synodal thing. There's that horrible China deal, the targeting of bishops, Father Sirico, like Strickland and Dominique Ray in France. These are two great bishops who were sidelined because they dared to raise questions about what's happening, and God forbid, they're Orthodox traditional bishops.
Yeah. I think, just on that litany that you just gave, what we need is a pope who's going to be a unifier, which is what the role of the pope is to uphold your brothers. So I think we need a personality that will let the dust settle. I know some people who are more traditionally minded want a Catholic Doge. They want somebody to come in with the meat cleaver and clean it out. I think we have the whole church to think of here. And I think if we can use this experience of the ambiguity and the foibles of the last, I have to say, Francis, to the extent that he's admired by many people, because he is really admired by the person on the street who doesn't follow stuff the way we do. It's his message of forgiveness and mercy and love. And I think that's the part of this pontificate, whatever else you want to say about it, whether it was sincere, whether it was real and all the rest of it. I think that's a good lesson for us to talk in those terms.
I will add one little coda here before we sign off. For many of the young men watching this show and who I come across in the world who are searching, and you see the polls, you see the Pew survey where the faith is growing in these young men. They're yearning for leadership. Pope Francis is not attracting them, Father. They are looking for a strong father figure who will stand counterculturally in the breach and offer the clarion call to the world that this is truth, this is Jesus Christ, come and stand and fight with me. It's worth it. The battle and the adventure is worth it. And that we haven't heard from a pope in an awful long time. I'll give you the last word.
No, I agree with you. It's absolutely needed. My only concern is that we don't do it with anger. That we do it with of love that Jesus shows the woman caught in the act of adultery. He protects her. He stops the stones from being thrown at her. He directs himself to her and says, I don't condemn you. But then he says at the end, and this is the things that's been muted, go and sin no more.
Yep. We need to hear that again. And I also like that he confronts all of the those in judgment, and he writes their sins in the sand. We need that part of it too. But Father, we could go on for a long time, but I'm going to have you back. Thank you so much, Father Robert Sirico, for being here, and we'll check in with you in the days ahead.
Arrivederci.
Thank you, my friend. Now a little free flow. For a slew of stars, this season could be called Remaking Reality. I speak of Meghan Markle, Alec Baldwin, and Gavin Newsom. Each have launched what amounts to a fantastical reality show meant to remake, retool, or redeem their tarnished images. For all three, unless they sit down with Joe Rogan, I don't see how this changes anyone's impression of any of them. Meghan Markle is rightly or wrongly seen as someone who manipulated the weakest link among the British royals and basically broke the chain. She claimed the royals were racist, and now she's desperately trying to lay claim to the title she claims to hate and never earned. Meghan now says Sussex is her last name. It kind of fits. Every time the public sees her, they go, wow, that's Sussex. Thank goodness she's not the Duchess of Cambridge. She'd be calling herself Chancellor of the University. Markle has repeatedly tried to rebrand herself as a podcaster, a filmmaker. Now she wants to be an icier version of Martha Stewart. She has a new Netflix show called With Love, Meghan, where she cooks, entertains, and lays it on thick. I'd prefer the show be called With Pretense, Meghan. Do any of us believe she's spending her days frosting cakes and making cookies with edible flowers for her royal kids? Come on. She should lean into her true superpower, slandering the in-laws. Then we might watch. She could call it Without Apologies, Meghan. I might tune in. Then there's Alec Baldwin. After years of losing his temper with strangers and family and shooting a member of his own film crew, Baldwin now wants you to believe he's just a kindly dad like you and me. His new show, The Baldwins, features he and his wife running between New York and the Hamptons and New York with their nannies, 7 kids, and 8 pets. After watching one episode of this train wreck, I wanted to call Child Protective Services and PETA. The forced family hijinks feel so entitled and removed from reality. I mean, this is like Michael Myers trying to convince you that he's really just a shy masquerader. The Baldwin show is, pardon the pun, a misfire. I don't care if you have 100 kids and your wife speaks every dialect in Central America and can make all the food to match. Nobody is confusing Alec Baldwin with Father Knows Best. Listening to this familial fraudulence, one thing is clear. Father can't shoot straight, especially with his audience. Then there's California Governor Gavin Newsom. If you were the governor of a state that has just endured fires that consumed a landmass twice the size of Manhattan, what would you be doing? Why, starting a podcast called This is Gavin Newsom. But is it really? This is a political restoration project where Newsom is recruiting people from across the aisle, like Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon, to try to make him look more moderate by proximity. But I guess it's better than his first title. This is the only way to salvage my reputation before I run for president with Gavin Newsom. The governor promised to end homelessness in his state, but like taxes, regulations, and soot, it all seems to be increasing there. No one is buying this, especially the people of California, who know exactly who this Gavin Newsom is. Look, I'm all for redemption, but these three need to learn that redemption begins not with a reality show, but with true contrition for your public mistakes. Maybe all three of them could collab on that show, begging forgiveness with Gavin, Alec, and Markle. It would be a hit, but I doubt it would ever get off the ground. Which of them would shut up long enough for the others to talk? And at least 2 of them would have to wear Kevlar. Now to our deep dive. Dr. Ming Wang may not be known to you, but he is a renowned eye surgeon who created a technology that has restored the sight of millions of people. The lens he created and his personal story of escaping communist China is inspiring, and if you listen and watch this, he may just save your sight. Here's Dr. Ming Wang. I want to start with 5 generations of your family were physicians, were doctors.
Yes.
Tell me about the power of the past, the burden and the blessing of the past, and what influence that had on you at the beginning of this journey.
First of all, thank you so much, Ray, for the opportunity to be with you today. What I realized that each of us as human beings, in our development growing up, there are 2 main stages. First stage is imprinting stage. Second stage is self-learning and growing up. And my family having 5 generations of being physicians, my grandfather, and all the way to my father, to me, has significant impact on the first stage of mine, which is the imprinting. So imprinting means acquiring a knowledge at earlier child development, which will have a profound impact to the rest of our lives. In other words, if you acquire the same sets of information later in life, one will not have that impact. And that's called imprinting.
Right.
So I was heavily imprinted when I was a kid.
And then, of course, as a young boy, the Cultural Revolution hits China.
Yeah.
You're in school. What happens?
It's interesting. It's very difficult for people here in the West to understand what happened. In 1966, the leader in China decided the best way to keep on dictating is to keep people ignorant. The best way to keep people ignorant is to literally shut down all universities and colleges of entire China for 10 years.
Wow.
From 1966 to 1976, and forcefully deported every single high school graduate to some of the poorest part of the country and condemn each one of us a life sentence of hard labor and poverty. It's called Cultural Revolution or Cultural Holocaust, really. So I caught that in 1974. I was 14. I finished my 9th grade. I was a straight student because I studied really hard. I wanted to be a doctor, like my parents and my grandparents onwards. But I couldn't even go to high school because I was going to be sent away to labor camp. And the only way to escape being sent away to labor camp is to play a music instrument. It's called Chinese violin, erhu.
Erhu, yeah.
Or learn how to dance. Because if I have got to play an instrument or learn to dance, I can get into the government song and dance troupe. Therefore, avoid being sent away to labor camp, being allowed to stay in the cities.
And did your parents encourage you to do that? I love the innovation of this.
Yes.
Again, it shows the determination too. You clearly wanted a better life, and you knew that labor camp was not the path to it.
Yeah. And sometimes as a kid, as a matter of fact, you saw in the film Sight, now Andrew Studio distributing that film, that I, as a kid at 14-year-old, I didn't quite understand why I should study the music instrument. I want to be a doctor. Yeah. My mom said something which you saw in the film. She said, sometimes in life, it is not always straight line. So sometimes you have to recognize, sometimes it's zigzag. It will come back to the same goal, but you have to understand that life sometimes is zigzag lines.
And tell me, what happens after? What happens after this point? I mean, in 1976, the Cultural Revolution allows, at that point, it's really not over, it continues, but it allows you to go to school and you apply to university. What happens?
So 1976, after 10 years of Cultural Revolution, shutting down all universities and colleges in China, Cultural Revolution ended and the universities got reopened. And I only had junior high education because 3 years prior, I got kicked out of the school after junior high, 9th grade. My parents said, you got to go back to school. You can go back to school. I thought I'd never be able to hear that. I said, really? But you have to jump 3 years ahead overnight. From 9th to 12th overnight. And I said, even if somehow magically become a 12th grader, what's my chance to get into college as a 12th grader? They said less than 1%. Because there are 10 years of backlog of students who finished high school in their 10 years prior, from 66 to 76. They didn't get to go to college because university was shut down. So now all of them came back, so there are 10 times more applicants. So I faced this impossible task of go back to school, but jump 3 years ahead from 9th to 12th overnight and compete against other 12th graders for less than 1% chance of getting to college.
But it happened.
I work hard, but my parents helped me. That they really, they made me study really hard. And I was very fortunate at the time I listened to them. You know, today some kids don't want to listen to parents, but I was fortunate I did listen to them. And that's how I got into college. That's why the film Sight, I dedicated the film to my parents.
And then you go from that university in China to MIT in the United States. How does this happen? Well, it's Maryland. First you go to University of Maryland, then you're at MIT, then you end up at Harvard. Tell me about that trajectory. How did you come to the United States?
I wanted to come to the United States for a long time because in college I saw many movies and read books about it's a country with a freedom. And so I wanted, but my parents were very poor. They were only making like $15 a month, extremely poor. So I couldn't afford to come to America as a result. But one day, I heard as a student in this university in China that there was going to be an American professor visiting our campus. So there I've got my little plan to come to America. Next, I prepared well. The next day, he gave a lecture, about 600 students. At the end, he said, any questions? None of us really understood what he was talking about because our English is so limited. But every student's very quiet, but I raised my hand. And he said, yes. I asked him a question that I spent whole night before in preparing to ask him.
What was that question?
The question is, what is the academic load of your school? The problem is, he didn't understand what I was saying because my English is so poor at pronunciation. And so then I realized, I spent whole night to prepare to ask a question, but I forgot to prepare how to listen to an answer. So I have no idea what he was saying. He must be saying that, what do you mean? So I just keep on repeating the same question 9 times. So finally he got hang of it, what my question is. It turns out that I did study English textbook already the night before, but I studied a British, not American, English textbook. So the way the question was worded is in the British way. Academic load in Great Britain means how many credits you're supposed to have to graduate. Anyway, he figured out my question finally. He answered. I have no idea what he was saying, but I got to ask my question. So before he walked off the podium, this American professor, he goes, that kid, I want to see him in America. So with $50 borrowed from him, 1982, I came to America.
And he helped engineer it?
Yeah.
Wow. And you come here and you're studying lasers. Why lasers? Why was that the focus?
I realized that I have some background in training in lasers in college in China. And I realized that a new era was coming, a combination of laser and medicine. So I have the technical training. I want to get a PhD in lasers. And then I want to get my second doctorate degree, this time MD from, end up to be Harvard, MIT. And then I can be a unique laser eye surgeon, combine not just medicine training, but also technical training as well.
Tell me about Misha Bartnovsky. Who is he? How did he come into your life?
He is an American. After I came to America, that I met him and his wife. You saw him in the movie.
Yes.
That he became basically my mentor, helped me. He's older, and he has a very strong research technical background. So we worked together. We developed a technology called amniotic membrane contact lens, which now has transformed the world now, used nearly in every nation, and millions of patients have eyesight restored.
And I want to get to that. Tell me about, there's a little girl who comes to you. It's the focus of the movie, but it's really the focus. It becomes the focus of your work because it's a turning point. And those turning points are so critical. She's a little girl from Calcutta, Kajal. Who is she? What happens?
Yeah, this happened in 2007. I set up a facility, a team to take care of kids, blind orphan children from around the world. We've been doing that work for about 25 years now. So 2007, it came to our attention. There was a 5-year-old orphan in Calcutta, India, who was an orphan already, but one night she was intentionally blinded by her own stepmother, who poured sulfuric acid into Kajal's eyes in an attempt to make Kajal a blind orphan child who can sing on the streets, who therefore will get more money from tourists. Kajal was maliciously blinded, but then they found that she couldn't sing. She had no talent of singing. That's why she was abandoned. In a train station near Calcutta, India, almost died from starvation, blind, being orphaned, and almost died from hunger. So our foundation rescued her, brought her to America. So the film Sight is about Kajal's remarkable journey trying to come from darkness to light.
But she really teaches you to see in a curious way.
Yes.
How did she do that? What did you discover?
We did everything we could in terms of trying to do everything possible. There are two major changes that occurred to me as a result of taking care of Kajal. Number one, sometimes people say, Ming, why are you so passionate taking care of these kids, blind orphan children? My answer is very simple. If you have the chance or have the experience of living in the darkness yourself one time, you would appreciate the pain they are living now in the darkness. I used to be that way. I used to be in darkness during Cultural Revolution, had no future. So I know how these kids feel when they're in darkness today. So that's, Kajal taught me further that I want to continue to devote my life to helping these kids to come from the darkness, because I used to be darkness myself. And second, Kajal taught me something even deeper. That is, we have two kinds of sides, physical side and emotional side and spiritual side. Sometimes when, even in the absence of physical side, even when there's no light come from outside, light could emanate from within if we have emotional and spiritual side. So there's more to life than what we see.
What happened at the eyeball, which is a gala you hold every year, not an eyeball itself, but it's a ball, a gala to raise money for the great work you do to cure eyesight, restore eyesight. But Kajal is at that eyeball, and you realize you can't cure her. What happens there?
First of all, eyeball is an offshoot of the dancing I learned during Cultural Revolution to escape labor camp at the time. I thought, well, helping kids should be something more than just the medical clinic. It should invite the society to join in for the noble cause of helping those kids, blind orphan children who need the most help and get the least help. So I thought combine medicine and the music and dance, create the eyeball. Eyeball is beautiful, right? When you come to eyeball, it's almost like you go into the scenery of the movie Sound of Music. The people, ball gowns and tails and beautiful. But the point is that all the beautiful dancing remind us, as a human being, how important, indispensable our sight is. Therefore, how much we need to help those who could not see. So that's the concept of eyeball. And so in 2008, when we had the eyeball, we always feature the patients we helped, and that was Kajal's turn. Despite our best effort, we could not restore her eyesight, and I was very down, depressed. Not only Kajal could never see, I could never come out of my own darkness in the past, but also I was disappointed at my God, because I'm a Christian, and I felt, God, how come you didn't answer our prayer? Sometimes it's very difficult for Christians that we pray, and it seems that God did not answer what we pray for. So, but at the eyeball, I learned that Kajal's fighting spirit, despite the blindness, she's made the best that what life has dealt, the card that life has dealt with her. And she moved on. She's able to let go her suffering past and being able to see there's more to life than what you see. She's even found the room in her heart to love other children. So Kajal taught me that there's more to life than what we see.
Tell me how the amniotic contact lens came to be. The process of this is fascinating. How did you stumble upon this great invention?
I wanted to help Kajal and many other blind orphan children, and one of the problems that I identify in the world today is the eye blindness due to corneal scar as a result of injury, infection, and malnutrition is one of the leading causes of blindness in the developing countries. So I started doing research, trying to figure out how can I reduce the scarring of the eyeball, therefore restoring eyesight in these folks. And I realized the only person who does not scar is an unborn child. So here's interesting, right? Before you and I were born, we have this magical ability to regenerate, heal without scar. At the time of birth, we lose the magical ability. We take on a new process called fibrosis, or healing with scar. So I said, wow, I want to figure out how the unborn child can heal without scar, but can you do research on a fetus without hurting fetus life.
Yeah.
They say, oh, there's no common ground between science and moral ethical faith principles. Is it really true? Fortunately, as a Christian, as mentioned, I did not give up. I said, well, God must want me to proceed, research, help these kids, but preserve life at the same time. And I was praying and I was believing God will show me the way. Eventually, my experience in Cultural Revolution, as you saw in the film, when the Red Guards came to raid the university, ransack the university, my father hid me in the little closet. Otherwise, I would be killed by the Red Guards. When I was hidden in the closet, I remember seeing the baby in the jar. And as a teenager.
And where is this?
This in China during the Cultural Revolution.
Well, where are you?
Oh, in Hangzhou and in the university when my parents worked.
Itself.
And so you saw in the film side. And but I didn't know what the significance of that, the baby in the jar, very scary thing. But years later, as I was doing this research, I said, wow, maybe the unborn child can heal without scar. Maybe because the membrane, the placenta that surround the baby. And we do lose that placenta protection at the time of birth.
Right.
So maybe that's what made the difference. So instead of touching any part of the baby, maybe I can take the placenta, which is always discarded anyway, and to the research, maybe the magic of scarless healing before birth has to do with the placenta, the amniotic sac. So I got those placenta donated to me by mothers after giving birth to children. They don't need the placenta anymore. And I work with other scientists. Eventually, we developed the amniotic membrane contact lens. So it's a placenta contact lens. And here's the thing, right? I put this placenta contact lens on injured eyes. Magic happened. Indeed, the scar is much reduced and sight is restored. So then I asked myself a question, did I really invent the amniotic membrane contact lens? I concluded no, because I did not invent the placenta, I did not invent the amniotic membrane. God did. As a scientist and a Christian, God just gave me the opportunity, a precious opportunity, to catch a little glimpse of part of His original creation. Yeah. So I said, glory belongs to God. And also as an immigrant, I'm so grateful. I'm thinking about, I came here with nothing, only $50. I could hardly speak English, and I knew no one. From that point, it is America has given me the opportunity to have a life, to have the opportunity to do this research to help these kids. So I'm very grateful. So I decided I need to pay back as an immigrant. So I donated my patent.
You didn't hold on to the patent?
Yeah, I donated the patent to the world. I put it online, and I went around about 50-some countries over a 20-year period and taught, without charging, over 10,000 eye doctors how to use this technology. Wow. So today, amniotic membrane contact lens, right, is a $5 billion industry worldwide. Wow. Doctors from nearly every nation are using it. Millions of patients have their eyesight restored. Even though I did not make any money myself in the process, but I felt, first of all, it's God's invention. Credit goes to Him. And second, is my small way to pay back as immigrant.
Beautiful. I mean, it's an incredible breakthrough. Why wouldn't it apply to other parts of, why couldn't you apply this to scarred hands?
Oh, we are working on that.
Really?
Because our next goal is to, to help U.S. military, the soldiers on war front, when they have burn, and the burn, they have scar, right? So we're working on the system. How can we deliver this membrane, not just a little contact lens, a large sheath of the amniotic membrane? I mean, I can make a huge difference in the war front. Soldiers can significantly reduce their scarring.
It's incredible. I mean, it is, I mean, you mentioned the word magic. I would say it's divine. I mean, you're tapping into God's creative act. At its inception, for all of us, in all of our lives. It is incredible. Tell me, tell us how we can truly see. Many of us see, but we don't really.
Vision is fascinating. It has a very two distinct process: physical capturing of the image and the visual interpretation. And we all understand the first part. If a light comes into the eyeball versus no the light comes in, okay, or scarring or something. But we underappreciate the second process, which is the visual interpretation. There are people who can see but don't know what they mean. People who have stroke in certain part of the brain, the occipital bone, the lobe on the back, they actually could have stroke in the visual interpretation. They capture, like a camera, the eyeball, they capture image, they don't know what it means. But also, our life experience give us a visual cultural literacy. We have to have those experience to understand what we are seeing. That's very dependent about our ethnicity, nationality, life experience. So it is important for every citizen of the world to not only have the reading,
the visual apprehension, the
image, but also have enough cultural background
to know what it means.
To know what it means.
You know, Doctor, this is what this entire show is about. The Arroyo Grande show is about cultural literacy, seeing what everybody's seeing, but they're missing the point of it,
yes,
or the impact it's having on you, your family, your community.
Yes.
And I love that you're not only restoring and interested in restoring your patient's sight, but helping them gain a deeper vision.
Yes. Yes.
And that really seems to be your mission. I mean, I was interested in my research. You're focused on common ground.
Yes.
Why is that so elusive, do you think, in the world?
Yes.
Is it getting better, do you think?
It's getting worse, actually, yeah.
Really?
I think it is deep within our human nature, want to be regard each of us a little bit better than the next person. Because in the old days, when natural resources are limited, the demise of another person in the community actually means good news for this person because I have more food and natural resources. But as a human, as a society, we have to overcome this very strong, selfish, self-centered dominance of I'm doing better, I don't care about others. That's human genetics.
Yeah.
And today, the world is moving in the direction of increasingly we are polarized. We're increasingly unable to work across political aisles, racial divides, and ethnic divisions. We're increasingly fixated on differences rather than appreciating what we have in common. It's like a glass, if it's half full, we're human beings, by our nature, it's always focused on what's this empty part. Hey, Ray, what's different between you and me? You know, you're better looking, and all that. But how about focus on what we have in common? We're both human beings, right? And we both aspire to be happy, to be loved, right? So what I'm thinking is we need to change our human nature.
How do you do that?
We need to, first of all, understand why we need to overcome the polarization from the common ground. Because otherwise, human being is heading the deadly spiral polarization, self-destruction.
Tell me what a great leader looks like to you in all your experience.
I think a great leader is someone who ultimately recognizes his or her own limitations. And that's sometimes interesting. They say, well, does that come from a great leader? Yes. We naturally expect great leaders should be someone who is most confident or knows most or capable of doing the most. I think the great leader is someone who is the most humble. Because in only recognizing our limitations, then we can say, you know what, I cannot do this well. So I need to do something to improve my capability of doing this rather than, oh, I can do this. And without recognizing my default, then I end up doing it, not doing it as well. Great leaders recognize their own limitations and apply their strength, their work to where their strength is, and avoid using their ability to areas they're not strong at.
Tell me about the Wang Foundation for Sight, which you have founded, and your focus is primarily to help those who have obviously lost their sight, but you offer free surgeries to those who could never afford the technology and the skill that you bring.
I have realized something about medicine, right, in recent decades, that we tend to think we need the next research in the laboratory. We need to devise new drugs, new surgeries. But on the worldwide scale, including not just developed countries like America, Western Europe, but also developing countries, Africa and others, you recognize on a worldwide scale, the number one problem is not new research, new drugs. The number one problem is bring the existing research to the best side of people who need the most but least could afford. That is actually going to make the biggest difference in the healthcare of humankind today.
So, what's the biggest danger that you see in eye health today? What should people be aware of or not be doing?
Yeah, I think there's a universal lack of recognition about that human eye is an organ, just like many other organs. You have to take care of it. You know, you exercise for your muscle, for your heart, and there's exercise for the eye. You do certain things to keep your health, you know, for your body. You have to do certain things to keep your eye healthy. So it's not an organ to be ignored. It's actually one of the most important senses we have among hearing, touching, speaking. Many people say vision, right? So eye has to be proactively understood and learned in terms of what you can do to improve eye health. For example, one of the dominant problems in the Western Europe today, Western world today, is macular degeneration. Okay, people get older, they develop macular degeneration, and guess what? One of the most preventable factors that leading the increased risk of macular degeneration is ultraviolet light from the sun. So it is very important, especially for blue iridese patient and blue-eyed that has less pigment, that when the sunlight out there, you have to wear sunglasses. That behavioral change alone will significantly reduce the chance of macular degeneration and also cataract formation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just sunlight exposure.
Yes. Second, for example, we have, as human beings with the cell phone, today, that we increasingly develop a visual fixation. And we'll look at the cell phone, little interesting tweets and little interesting for a long time, right?
Yeah.
That's not good for eye because you are fixing your focal length at the particular distance for a long period of time. Our eyeball is not designed for that. For example, can you imagine I'm holding a bucket of water and hold it for like
the same
without changing? I'm going to be sore. It's going to damage. Right. And people say, wait a minute, Dr. Wang, you mean if I abuse my organ, in this case eye, I'm going to age faster? Yes, it's like a car. If you drive car 10,000 miles a year, you might be able to drive for 20 years. But if you drive 100,000 miles a year, you're not going to be able to drive the car for 1 year. Increasing use and abusing use of any human organ only accelerated its aging and damage. We have to recognize eye is not an exception. So this is abuse.
So get off the cell phones.
It's difficult to do.
Well, but people have to. We do difficult things all the time to stay healthy or to kill ourselves.
Exactly. So reduce cell phone, but one thing is called 20-20-20 rule, meaning 20 minutes of cell phone or near work or reading. Take a break for 20 seconds, look at an object at least 20 feet away. So what you're doing is you let your muscle
relax
and then focus. So that 20-20-20 rule is like exercise of a muscle rather than hold it for a long time. That will abuse it.
Okay, every episode I ask a series of Arroyo Grande questions. My normal questionnaire. You ready? These are rapid fire.
Yes.
You'll do well on these. Who is the person you most admire?
I admire Einstein.
Why?
Yeah, because he is thinking out the box. He was thinking out the box. That before him, we reckon space is three-dimensional, 3x, y, z. He was able to think four-dimensional, including the time. So thinking out the box, overcoming our natural instinct, I think that's how human being can progress. And Einstein's best example.
Who is the person you most despise?
Adolf Hitler. Because his self-proclaimed superiority, which is human nature, by the way, as I said, we are so polarized because we like to think I'm better than the next person. And he has taken that to an extreme.
What is your best feature?
My best feature?
Yeah.
I'm not the smartest. I'm like medium high IQ, but I recognize I can be the best student. So I'm actually learning all the time. I give you my little book, 事半功倍, how I learned from some very successful business people. Like today's interaction with you, I'm learning from you. I'm observing.
I'm learning a lot from you.
But I'm observing, I'm thinking while you're effective in what you do. So my best feature is I'm the good student.
What's your worst feature?
Worst feature, probably being a workaholic. And it's very difficult. In my autobiography, I talk about some imbalance between work and family. And because I'm so driven by work to help these kids, and it's a challenge how to achieve the balance
That
between
balance
family.
is always difficult. I think for every mother or father, it's hard. What is your favorite meal?
Favorite meal? I think it's a southern Chinese dish with some spice and some tofu, lots of vegetables, lots of green.
Good for the eyes.
Good for the eyes, vitamins C and E, A and E. That's my favorite dish.
Wow. Tell me, what do you fear, doctor?
I fear that human nature, we're driven, allow our human nature, the polarizing nature, the self-proclaimed superiority that take control better of us. And human beings just sliding into the deadly spiral of polarization and self-destruction.
Into the abyss.
Yes.
What's the last great book you read?
Great question. I think one of the last great books I read is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And what I learned here is this. Sometimes I argue with someone saying, hey, Johnny, this is wrong. And I couldn't get anywhere. And Dale Carnegie said, you know what? If you have good things to say, say it. If you only have bad things to say, don't bother. So if I can't change Johnny's mind, let him be. Because the only person I can change on this planet is myself.
That's wise. That's wise. What is the word you could not live without?
I think love for me, because it's for example, I love dancing, ballroom dancing. People say, oh, it's exercise, yes, but it is the love for music, love for that moment, transcendental moment, where we bring the beautiful costumes and music together to experience a deep passion among human beings for those beautiful things in our life. So that love for music and beauty, love for family, love for my work to help those blind orphan children is what drives me. And love for humankind itself, that to recognize we need to overcome polarization, find a common ground.
What is the greatest virtue in the world? What's the greatest virtue?
Humbleness. Humbleness. It's very difficult because we tend to, as human beings, we learn something, myself included. I think I know this, I know that. But to recognize what I still don't know is the greatest virtue.
What's your biggest regret? Do you have one?
I probably would desire to have been more balanced work and family. That is probably my biggest regret.
The best piece of advice you ever received was what?
In my little book, I met a professor, and he always got the diagnosis right. We are arguing, oh, this eye problem could be this, and he walked in, Dr. Savino, he comes in, he's like, this one. And I said, Dr. Savino, how did you get it right? I want advice. This is what he said. He said, Ming, as human beings, we tend to swim among uncertainties. Oh, it could be this, or it could be that. But I change my nature of such. I deliberately do something different. I'll go into a situation where you're all arguing about uncertainties. Or this next month you do this programming, or maybe this programming audience like more, and blah, 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 different possibilities. I change my focus from looking at the uncertainties to looking for, is there anything certain here? There'll be only one or two certainties, and then I hang my head on top of that. So overcome a human natural tendency of swimming around among uncertainties, but deliberately, rationally, logically look for certainties, albeit it could be few, is the best advice I've learned.
Great advice. If you could not do what you're doing, what do you think you would do? What would you like to do?
Yeah,
I think I know.
If I'm not a eye doctor today, I probably would be a erhu player, the Chinese violin. I love it. I love music composition. I compose some songs myself. dancer, ballroom dancer. I love ballroom
It's
dancing.
amazing to me, though. These are things you did out of survival. You discovered them out of survival.
Yeah.
But you found a deep passion in
Yes.
both of them.
Yes, and sometimes they say, how come, right? Here's interesting. If we like something as human beings, we have to deeply appreciate it. We have different ways to appreciate it. It could be something grandfather, father, they can inherit it, right? Imprinted. Or it could be something that through life experience, we learned the importance of it. In my case, I learned the dancing and also music instrument out of need to survive. So they are more important to me because I literally, without learning them, would not be able to survive. So they take a more importance to me than just a music instrument and hobby.
Wow. Beautiful. What happens when this is over?
This meaning the work or the music?
I'll let you interpret it.
Oh, okay.
Could be this life, could be this interview. What happens when this is over?
I would say, if I interpret this as my life, I wanted to be able to make, sometimes we say, what's the purpose? I mean, study science and medicine, these are tools. What's the purpose? To help those kids? Yes. But overall, all of these, what I do, I have one single purpose behind all of this medical work.
Which is?
Is to help make this world a little better place to live when I leave.
Dr. Ming Wang, thank you for the honor
Thank
of
you.
interviewing you. It was fascinating, wonderful, and inspirational.
Thank you. Thank you, Ray.
Here's the whole. I love what Dr. Wang taught us there. Seeing is not just a physical activity, but one informed by memory and spirit. And his experiences in the darkness of communist China, and how that prepared and made him sensitive to the darkness of his patients. It's clearly a driving force of his innovation and commitment to children and all people having problems seeing. And he certainly taught me to see differently. I hope you'll come back to Arroyo Grande soon. Why live a dry, narrow, constricted life when if you fill it with good things, it can flow into a broad, thriving Arroyo Grande? I'm Raymond Arroyo. Make sure you subscribe, like the episode. Thanks for diving in with us, and we'll see you next time. Bye now. Arroyo Grande is produced in partnership with the iHeart Podcast Network and is available on the iHeart Radio app or wherever you get your podcasts.